pulled a female CEO millionaire from a sinking yacht. Next morning, 5 SUVs stopped at his door. Crescent Bay stretched wide and still beneath a pale autumn sun. The water shimmered like glass, disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a gull landing or the quiet splash of a fish beneath the surface. At the far end of the dock, a small wooden boat bobbed gently. On board, Tom Harper, 35, sat cross-legged with a fishing rod in hand, weather-worn and quiet. Beside him, his 6-year-old daughter, Nancy, chattered away, her cheeks pink from the sea breeze. Nancy wore a bright blue life vest over a ruffled sea blue dress, her brown curls tied in a lopsided ponytail. She squinted at the float bobbing in the water, then grinned. "If we catch a big one, it'll be as big as Mommy, right, Daddy?" Tom smiled faintly, adjusting her vest strap. "Maybe even bigger." They sat in silence for a while. The only sounds were the creak of the boat and the occasional flap of sails from the nearby marina. Suddenly, the sky dimmed. Clouds thickened from the west, rolling in like a bruise. A gust of wind lifted Nancy's curls as she looked up. Why did it get dark? Tom turned toward the horizon. His eyes narrowed. Out in the deeper water, a sleek white yacht glided against the choppy waves. Then, smoke, a plume, thin at first, then darkening. A muffled pop echoed across the bay, followed by an orange bloom of fire along the aft deck. Tom stood instantly. "Nancy, PFD tight. Grab the radio. Call the Coast Guard now." "But Daddy." "Now, sweetheart. Stay right here. Do not move." She nodded, eyes wide, clutching her small walkie and fumbling with the call button. Tom yanked the motor line of the small outboard. It coughed, then roared to life. He steered straight toward the burning yacht, waves slapping hard against the hull. As he neared, flames licked the upper deck. He saw no one on board, until he spotted movement inside the main cabin. A woman. He barely registered anything beyond the flash of pale skin and long, golden hair tangled against the window. Smoke clouded the glass. She was slumped forward, unmoving. Without hesitation, Tom stripped off his flannel shirt and dove in. The cold bit deep. He kicked hard, reaching the side of the yacht, pulling himself up the slick railing, flames crackling overhead. Inside the cabin, the door was stuck. He pounded the glass with his elbow once, twice, until it cracked. Blood streamed from his arm, but he kept going, finally shattering the window. He reached in, grabbed the woman's shoulder, but she was pinned. Tom braced his legs and kicked the cabin door with all his strength. Once, twice, the latch broke loose. He lunged inside, lungs burning, wrapped his arm around her waist, and dragged her out, both of them tumbling into the water. He held her above the surface, kicking back to his boat. Every stroke felt like a mile. But he did not stop. On shore, he laid her gently in the sand. Her face was pale, lips blue. Tom pressed his ear to her chest. No heartbeat. "Come on," he muttered, beginning chest compressions. "Breathe." Nothing. He tilted her chin, gave 2 breaths, resumed compressions. His hands trembled from cold and blood loss. But after the 3rd set, she gasped, coughed. Her eyes fluttered. Alive. He let out a long breath, then scooped her into his arms and carried her back to the cabin. Inside, he settled her on the cot beside the fireplace. He bandaged his bleeding arm without a sound. Then he wrapped her in a wool blanket, set a steaming mug of cocoa on the nightstand, and placed a folded towel beside her head. The storm raged outside, but inside, the fire glowed steady. Tom did not sleep. He sat in the worn rocking chair near the cot, eyes never leaving the rise and fall of her chest. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Each cough made him tense. The woman stirred once in the night, murmuring incoherently. Her hair, golden and disheveled, stuck to her cheek. He reached out, gently brushed it back, and paused. He had seen faces like hers in magazines and checkout aisles, but he had never met anyone like her. And he certainly did not know that the woman with the tousled hair and scraped palms was Sierra Langford, tech magnate, Forbes-featured CEO of Langford Marine Tech, and one of the most powerful women in the industry he had walked away from. All he knew was that he had pulled someone from the sea, and now he would make sure she lived. The morning broke crisp and silver over Crescent Bay. Mist curled along the shoreline, brushing past the pine trees and drifting across the weathered windows of Tom's wooden cabin. Inside, the fire had long since died down. Sierra Langford stirred on the cot, wrapped in wool blankets, her face pale against the morning light. She blinked at the rough wood ceiling, then sat up slowly, wincing as a sharp pain flared in her ribs. Her head throbbed. A faint scent of cocoa and sea salt lingered in the room. She glanced around, the fireplace, the hand-knitted rug, a small table with a chipped mug. Her eyes landed on the man by the window. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked faintly with gray. His flannel shirt was rolled at the sleeves, revealing a bandaged forearm. He was watching the horizon, silent. When he noticed her awake, he nodded once. "You're alive. That's good." Sierra's voice was hoarse. "You saved me." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the counter and poured warm water into a mug. "Take it slow." You inhaled smoke. She sipped gratefully. Where am I?" "Crescent Bay." "You drifted a ways." My yacht." "Burned," he said simply. "You're lucky you got out." There was a long pause. Sierra watched him closely. No questions, no comments, just calm, collected care. Later that morning, while Sierra rested, Tom stopped at the local grocery for first aid supplies. A small TV mounted in the corner of the shop played the morning news. Still no sign of Sierra Langford, CEO of Langford Marine Tech, missing after an explosion on board her private yacht. Coast Guard search teams have yet to locate wreckage. The clerk looked up. "Crazy, huh? Big shot CEO just vanishes." Tom said nothing. He paid in cash and turned off the television on his way out. Back at the cabin, the sun was finally rising over the bay. Tom stood near the dock, wiping down a wooden oar when he heard the screen door creak. "Daddy," Nancy's voice rang out. He turned. The little girl stood on the porch, her sea blue dress fluttering in the breeze, a half-folded paper boat in her hands. "There are 5 black cars," she shouted, pointing up the path. "Really big ones." Tom looked up the gravel road leading toward the cabin, and there they were. 5 identical black SUVs. They rolled in with a low rumble, stopping just short of the dock. The doors opened in near synchronized motion. Several sharply dressed men and women stepped out, some with earpieces, one holding a leather case. They scanned the area with military precision before one of them nodded to the others. Sierra stepped onto the porch, still pale but composed. She walked forward slowly, bare feet on the wooden steps. A woman in a gray suit approached her. "Miss Langford, thank God. We've been searching all night. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," Sierra replied. The woman nodded. "We've prepared a statement. The media is waiting." Sierra looked over her shoulder at Tom. "One moment." She walked back, a small envelope in hand. "I owe you my life," she said softly. "This is a gesture of thanks." She held out the envelope. "And there's a non-disclosure agreement. Just a formality." Tom didn't take it. "I don't want your money," he said, "and I don't sign papers anymore." Sierra hesitated. She lowered the envelope. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Nancy crouched near the dock, folding another paper boat with intense concentration. Sierra walked over, knelt beside her. "You like boats?" she asked gently. Nancy looked up, nodded. "I'm making one that won't sink." Sierra smiled. Her fingers moved deftly, folding a crisp sheet into a precise, clean boat. She handed it to Nancy. "This one's called the Phoenix. Rises from the fire." Nancy's eyes widened. "You're really good." "Had some practice." Tom watched them, his expression unreadable. The entourage ushered Sierra toward the SUVs. She turned one last time to look at the cabin. Its peeling paint, the wind chimes dancing in the breeze, the man and his daughter watching quietly from the dock. She got in. The cars pulled away, tires crunching over gravel, vanishing down the road in a trail of dust. But Sierra Langford, CEO, paused in her thoughts, a crease forming between her brows as her mind replayed the image of a bloodied arm, a mug of cocoa, and a little girl's laughter over a folded paper boat. She had walked away from Crescent Bay, but she wasn't sure she'd be able to forget it. The wind howled across Crescent Bay that night, stirring the pine trees along the ridge and rattling the shutters on Tom's weather-worn cabin. Inside, the oil lamp flickered on the table as Tom sat alone, a steaming mug untouched in his hand. Nancy had fallen asleep in her little bed, clutching the paper boat Sierra had made. Tom's eyes drifted to the corner of the room, toward the old wooden chest, its hinges rusted, the surface scarred by time and salt. He stood, walked over, and knelt before it. With a careful hand, he opened the lid. Inside, beneath layers of old cloth, lay a thick binder wrapped in plastic. He lifted it out, his fingers brushing over the label he had written years ago in precise block letters. Langford Marine Tech, Alpha 9 Engine Series, Internal Structural Review. The pages inside were covered in diagrams, stress test results, and annotations in red ink. He remembered every one of them, every sleepless night he had spent reviewing the specs, every call unanswered, every warning ignored. Back then, he had been the lead structural engineer for Langford Marine Tech, one of the youngest department heads in the company's history. The Alpha 9 engine line was revolutionary, sleeker, lighter, faster. But something had felt off in the data, a subtle strain increase in the lower compression housing, a hairline expansion in high-pressure heat tests. He had written the report 3 months before the accident, and no one had listened. He had submitted it to his supervisor, waited, then escalated to corporate. Silence. Until, one rainy morning, an internal memo reached his desk. Sanitized language, no technical depth, stamped with the seal of someone high up in the food chain. All concerns have been addressed. No further action required. 2 weeks later, a Langford yacht off the Florida coast lost power mid-sea. It cracked in half during a sudden swell. His wife, Emily, had been on board. She had taken the boat to visit a client, 7 months pregnant with their second child, laughing when she kissed him goodbye. They never found her body. Tom Harper resigned the same day the news broke. He didn't take severance. He didn't answer calls from reporters. He packed up his daughter and drove cross-country until the roads narrowed and the sky turned blue again. Until they reached Crescent Bay. Since then, the designs had remained locked away, buried with the memories he could not face. Until now. Sierra Langford. He hadn't known her name when he pulled her from the water, but now her face, the same face from those business magazine covers at the grocery store, was burned into his mind. And so was her yacht, built with parts he recognized, a design he had once reviewed, a design he had tried to stop. He opened the folder to the first page. The blueprint stared back at him, his handwriting in the margins, notes scrawled with urgency. He had carried guilt for years, for not pushing harder, for not going public, for trusting the system to care. And now, Sierra had nearly drowned in the same waters that had taken Emily. Coincidence? Or a consequence? He closed the binder and placed it back into the chest, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he wasn't ready to act. Not yet. Tom stood slowly, glancing toward the small bedroom where Nancy slept. Her breathing was soft, even. He walked to the window, watched the moonlight ripple across the bay. Outside, the world believed Tom Harper was a recluse, a quiet man fixing boats for cash. But deep in that cabin, beneath old floorboards and grief, lay blueprints of betrayal, and a heart that once believed in the power of doing what was right. And maybe, just maybe, still did. The waves lapped gently at the dock pilings, the sea calm, as if mocking the storm that had almost claimed her life. Sierra Langford stood in the middle of her penthouse office, arms crossed, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Her hair, usually styled to perfection, now hung loose, slightly tousled. The sea air had not yet left her senses. Something was off. Every report her team submitted blamed the weather. Sudden storm, lightning strike, power failure, all plausible, all neat. Too neat. She remembered the crack in the hull, the grinding beneath her feet before the explosion. That wasn't weather. That was design. And then, one name surfaced in a buried maintenance memo. Thomas Harper, former head of structural integrity, Alpha 9 Engine Division, resigned 6 years ago. A note next to it. Submitted concerns, internal review closed. She felt her stomach twist. That night, she dismissed her driver. She did not notify her assistant. She booked a commercial flight, rented a pickup in the nearest town, and drove to Crescent Bay, alone. When she arrived, dusk was falling. Tom was repairing a small motor at the dock, sleeves rolled up, grease on his forearms, a silent shadow of the man who had pulled her from the sea. Nancy was nearby, swinging her legs off the end of the pier, her little pink dress fluttering in the wind. Sierra waited until Nancy skipped inside before she approached. Tom didn't look up. Thought you'd send more black cars. I came alone this time, Sierra said quietly. I needed to. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the cries of distant gulls. I read the internal logs, she continued. Someone tried to raise a red flag about the Alpha 9 series, the same engine line my yacht used. Tom didn't respond. Sierra stepped closer. Was it you? Finally, he looked at her. Those steady, storm-worn eyes that saw through surface and shine. I wrote a 40-page report, he said, voice flat. It got buried under a quarterly earnings presentation. Why didn't you go public? I had a daughter, a wife, and I still thought someone would do the right thing. He paused. They didn't. Her breath caught. I am sorry. You almost died on one of their boats, he said. You already paid part of the price. Sierra's voice cracked, not from emotion, but from something heavier. Humility. I used to believe I had control, that I could oversee every inch of my company. But if something this big got buried, if people died, I need to know the truth. She opened her bag and pulled out a notepad. Whatever you have, show me. Tom didn't take it. Instead, he turned and disappeared into his cabin. A few moments later, he returned with a folder, old, worn, corners creased. He held it out. Sierra took it slowly. These are copies, he said. Blueprints, stress tests, warnings, the names of who I sent them to. She looked down at the pages, her eyes scanning charts, annotations, signature stamps. Tom's voice dropped, almost a whisper. I used to think truth would save people. I thought by reporting it, I was doing my job, that I could fix the system from within. But Emily still boarded that boat. She died carrying our second child. Sierra looked up. I lost my entire world, he said, because someone wanted to protect a quarterly gain. The weight of it settled between them, shared now, no longer just his burden. Sierra nodded slowly, clutching the folder like it was more than paper. It was a reckoning. I do not know where this will lead, she said, but I won't let it sink again. Tom didn't answer. He just turned back to the boat engine, the rhythmic sound of his wrench clicking into place as the sky faded into night. And Sierra Langford, woman of numbers, stock prices, and control, walked away carrying something heavier than data. She carried the truth. The video was only 40 seconds long. Shaky hands, frantic waves, a grainy image of Tom dragging Sierra's limp body from the water onto the dock, blood trailing from his shoulder, his shirt torn. Someone had filmed it from the harbor and uploaded it with a catchy title: Mysterious Boatman Rescues Billionaire CEO. Real hero or setup. By morning, it had 2 million views. Within hours, the narrative shifted. Speculation flooded in. Was the yacht sabotage? Why didn't he call the Coast Guard first? Why was the CEO alone? What's his real connection to her? And worst of all, did he stage it for fame? Tom didn't own a smartphone. He only heard the whispers when he walked into the bait shop and the old men stopped talking. At the market, the cashier hesitated giving him change. By the pier, someone had scrawled "liar" in chalk on the wooden fence of his dock. He said nothing, just scrubbed it clean with salt water and sandpaper. But Nancy noticed everything. At school, the children didn't sit next to her at lunch. One boy hissed across the table, "Your dad pretended to be a hero so he could be on TV." Nancy blinked hard. He saved someone. Yeah, someone famous. Probably got paid. She didn't respond. Just looked down at the little paper boat in her hand, creased carefully, with Sierra's initials penciled on the sail. That night, she barely touched her dinner. Tom tried asking what was wrong, but she shook her head and excused herself quietly. When the house went quiet, Tom passed her room and paused. The door was closed, light off. From behind it, he heard quiet sniffles. He hesitated, then sat down on the floor, leaning against the wooden panel. The house creaked gently around him, like it always did during cold nights. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke, soft and steady. "When your mom was pregnant with you," he began, "she used to sing to the water." Inside the room, Nancy didn't reply, but her sniffles paused. She believed the ocean could carry good things further than bad ones, that even when people said nothing, truth would still sail out. He exhaled, hands resting on his knees. She died on a boat she trusted. And after that, I stopped believing in most things, but not in her. A long silence, the kind only found between people who've shared a storm. Tom reached into his pocket and placed a folded piece of cloth at the base of the door. It's okay to feel angry, to want to yell. But just remember, Nancy, sometimes the loudest truth is the one we live quietly, even when nobody claps. Then he stood and walked away. Inside the room, Nancy turned over in bed. She held the little paper boat Sierra had made, and beside her now, the cloth, her mother's old scarf, soft with time, smelling faintly of salt and lavender. She clutched them both. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, the night was still. The Langford Marine Tech boardroom gleamed with cold precision, glass walls, sleek steel chairs, and a long table polished to perfection. Sierra Langford sat at the head, her golden hair tied in a low chignon, face calm but resolute. Across from her, the members of the board murmured behind their laptops, some avoiding her gaze, others watching intently. At the far end sat her uncle, Gerald Langford, vice chairman, and the man whose influence had long shaped the company's direction. "I've reviewed the internal records," Sierra began, sliding a thick folder across the table. "And I have documents that show critical design flaws were brought to the company's attention 3 years ago. Specifically, in the HM-class propulsion systems." She tapped the folder gently. These reports were submitted by Thomas Harper, then chief design engineer. They were ignored. The room fell still. Gerald's jaw tightened. "Sierra, we've all agreed this tragedy was due to extreme weather." "No," Sierra cut him off. "We assumed it was, but the design flaw was documented, and after Tom's resignation, no further inquiry was made. Then came the Ocean Bell incident. People died, including his wife. Sierra, be careful, another board member warned, his voice low. She leaned forward. I won't be careful with the truth. And I won't protect negligence with silence. Gerald's voice darkened. Do you realize what you're doing? You're risking everything. Investors, public trust, the company's legacy. I'm protecting what the company should stand for. A tense silence fell over the room. Then Gerald said coolly, if you pursue this, we'll ask for your resignation. As CEO. There it was. The threat made plain. Sierra looked around the table. Men and women she'd known for years. Some looked away. Others looked at her with apology in their eyes. None spoke in her defense. She stood up slowly, straightened her blazer, and said, then ask for it. But know this. My resignation won't stop the investigation. I've already submitted these documents to an independent maritime safety board. An internal probe is no longer enough. There will be a full-scale audit. Someone gasped. Gerald's eyes flashed with anger. And if you push me out, Sierra added, I'll testify publicly. I'll make it clear I was removed for doing the right thing. Her voice didn't waver. I'd rather lose my title than keep it with blood on my hands. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the general counsel cleared her throat. We should reconvene after legal has reviewed the documents. Sierra nodded once and gathered her things. As she walked out, her hands trembled, but her back remained straight. Later that evening, Sierra sat in her office, the sun setting behind the tall windows. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. My mother died on the Pacific Emerald 3 years ago. No one ever told us what went wrong. Thank you for not staying silent. She stared at the message for a long time, then placed the phone face down. Her eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the horizon. Somewhere beyond that skyline, the sea stretched endlessly, and so did the consequences of silence. She thought of Tom, of his cabin by the water, of Nancy's quiet laughter and the sound of waves crashing on the shore. She thought of a man who had lost everything, but still chose to tell the truth. And for the first time in years, Sierra felt like she was finally worthy of carrying the Langford name. Not as a shield, but as a promise. The tide had shifted. After Sierra's bold confrontation in the boardroom, the media took a hard turn. What began as skeptical murmurs about Tom Harper soon transformed into stories of quiet heroism and integrity. Headlines now read, Whistleblower Engineer Vindicated, and From Reclusion to Redemption, the Man Who Saved the CEO. Photos of Tom carrying Sierra from the flaming wreck circulated everywhere, now paired not with rumors, but with context. People saw him differently. The scar on his shoulder, once a sign of retreat, now marked a battle well fought. Langford Marine Tech released a public statement, an official apology to the families affected by the structural failures, including the Harpers. A multi-million-dollar fund was established in honor of the victims. For Tom, it wasn't money that mattered, it was acknowledgement. One late afternoon, a familiar black SUV pulled up by the weather-worn dock. Tom had just finished repairing a fishing net, his hands stained with salt and grease. He looked up as the door opened. Sierra stepped out. Gone was the business armor. She wore simple jeans, a windbreaker, and her blonde hair tied back loosely, still glowing as the sea breeze tangled it slightly. She didn't walk straight to him. Instead, she looked around, taking in the place with a slower gaze than before, as if every wood grain in the old planks had earned her respect. She stopped in front of him and handed over an envelope. Tom didn't take it immediately. What is it? A job offer, she said. Head of Independent Safety Oversight. Reporting only to the board. No corporate strings. No compromises. Tom studied her face. I walked away from that world for a reason, he said. I know, she replied. That's why I'm asking you to walk back in. He didn't respond. Not yet. A door creaked behind them. Nancy stepped out onto the porch in a soft pink dress that shimmered in the golden light. It was the same one Sierra had brought weeks ago, now slightly crumpled from play. She clutched a paper flower in her hand. When she saw Sierra, she broke into a grin and ran forward. "I saved this," Nancy said, holding out the flower, "so I could give it to you next time." Sierra knelt to take it, her eyes softening. "I missed you," Nancy said quietly. "You were the first person to make Daddy laugh again. I think you should come back." The words settled into the quiet like a prayer whispered into wind. Tom looked down at the girl who looked so much like her mother, brave, sensitive, clear-eyed, and then at Sierra, who hadn't flinched from the fire, the scandal, or the cost. He took the envelope. "I'll think about it," he said, tucking it into his coat. Sierra smiled, standing. "I'll wait." They stood there, three figures on a sun-drenched dock, a past forgiven behind them, and a future not yet written, stretching out ahead. And for the first time in years, it felt like the tide was in their favor. The wooden bridge stretched across the quiet inlet, its boards weathered but strong, much like the man who walked it slowly now. Tom Harper walked in the middle, Nancy skipping ahead of him in her favorite pink dress, arms wide like airplane wings. Sierra walked beside him, her blonde hair tousled by the sea breeze, glowing softly in the amber wash of the setting sun. The ocean rolled gently below, its surface rippling in gold and rose. Gulls cried overhead. Everything felt suspended in time, as if the world itself had paused to breathe. "I love this bridge," Nancy called out. "It's like walking into a painting." Tom smiled but said nothing. His fingers clutched something in his jacket pocket. Sierra glanced at him. "You're quiet today," she said softly. He stopped walking. So did she. Nancy continued forward, spinning in circles, humming to herself. Tom turned to face Sierra. He pulled something from his pocket, a small, square wooden box. She blinked, caught off guard, but when he opened it, there was no ring. Inside sat a single, worn key. Sierra looked at it, confused for only a second. Tom's voice was quiet, but certain. "I don't know what we are. I don't know if there's a word for it yet, but if you want, that house has a place for you. Always." Her eyes filled, not with shock, but something deeper. Acceptance, gratitude, 1,000 unspoken things. She didn't take the key. Instead, she reached for his hand and held it tightly. Tom exhaled, not relief, something softer. Behind them, Nancy squealed, running back toward them. She threw her arms around both their legs and shouted to the sea. "Yeah, we're a team." Sierra and Tom laughed, freely, like wind. The sun dipped lower, and three shadows stretched long over the bridge, moving forward together. 1 year later, International Marine Safety Conference. The stage lights dimmed slightly as Tom Harper stepped to the podium. He was dressed in a crisp navy suit, a quiet contrast to the shimmering backdrop behind him that read, "Truth, Safety, Future." He looked out over the crowd, industry leaders, reporters, engineers, and in the front row sat Sierra Langford, elegant, composed, and watching him with calm pride. Beside her, Nancy sat tall, her pink dress replaced by a little blazer, feet barely touching the ground, but her smile full of knowing. Tom adjusted the mic. "We do not need more heroes," he said. "We need more people who speak the truth, even when no one listens. We need systems built not just for profit, but for people." He paused, and for a moment, the silence in the room was thick. "But most of all," he continued, "we need each other." Applause started slowly, then grew. And as Tom stepped back from the podium, Sierra stood, clapping first. Nancy beamed. And somewhere behind the crowd, a quiet tide turned. From a storm at sea to a summit of truth, The man who once lived in silence had found his voice and a family through the simplest act of all, saving someone. If this story of courage, healing, and second chances touched your heart, imagine how many more tales are waiting to be told. At Kindness and Love Tales, we believe in everyday heroes, whispered truths, and the quiet moments that change everything. Don't miss our next emotional journey. Subscribe now and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story that could inspire your day or mend a piece of your heart. Because sometimes, kindness doesn't just save lives, it creates families. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.